recording so that I don't forget to do that later. And we'll get started. Of course, both of you guys know, since you've been here many times before, that that you are muted and I can't hear you. So, but feel free to. Hopefully, maybe some other people will join as we go along. But right now, I just see the two of you. So, feel free to ask questions at any point, and you could do that by typing in the chat box or the question box, and it'll pop up on my screen. Okay, so this is again, this is being recorded. So that anybody who wants to view it later on, it will be posted on YouTube, and an email will go out to anybody who's registered for the webinar, so you can share it with other people. And today's topic is formatting data in a report. There was a essentially identical topic that we did. It might actually be 2 years ago. Hard to believe I've been doing these webinars for that long, but we did a topic of formatting data in a dashboard. So if you have somebody who's working on dashboards and you think that these topics would be pertinent to them, except that they're not doing reports, they're doing dashboards, then by all means take a look back on our YouTube channel and see if you can find, I think it might have even been from 2014 or maybe 2015, there was that topic, formatting data in a dashboard. So that would be pretty much all the same stuff that that I plan to do right now, except in a dashboard. And there are some differences. There are differences in capabilities, but there's also differences in the interface, and so it's something to pay attention to. So let's just get started. I'm going to close this, and in the background here, I have Style Studio already open. Style Studio, of course, is our report design tool. And pardon me, I have a bit of a cold, so I'll be coughing my way through this webinar, unfortunately. And so what I have here is I've created a sample report. I'll just quickly show you what it is. I have a Style Studio in live edit mode, which means that it's displaying the report with the data. If I were to turn that off in Style Studio, this is probably the way people typically would design reports in metadata view, then it would look like this, and it's basically, there's a title at the top, there's a chart over here that displays a breakout by salesperson and by month, and it shows the totals, and then there's a cross tab, pardon me, down at the below the chart, and that breaks it out by category and product name, and again by salesperson, showing the totals and the quantity purchased for each of those combination, each of those subgroups. And then there's some text elements down at the bottom that, obviously I did not bother to put anything very interesting there. So that's the whole report, and I have the report in landscape mode because the chart is quite wide. So I'm just going to put the chart back into live edit mode, and rather the report back into live edit mode. So this is what the report would actually look like, essentially, if I were to preview it. All right, so this is the report. It goes on for a couple of pages because the cross tab goes on to the second page, and so on. So that's what we have. Okay, and what I'd like to talk about is just different kinds of formatting that you can do in a report. So let's begin with some simple things, such as formatting dates and numbers wherever they might appear in a report. Whether they, those dates and numbers might appear in a chart, they might appear in a table, they might appear in text elements. So that's kind of the most basic formatting that you'd find yourself doing in a report, is just changing the appearance of dates, numbers, text, and things like that. Now, there are actually several places that you can do formatting from within Style Studio, and as you look around the interface, some of those might pop out at you. First of all, you have the toolbar up at the top, so if you want to do basic formatting like font and font size, bold, alignment, stuff like that, you've got those options up here at the top. So for example, you could select a text element, and if you wanted to change the size or the font, you could do that just from the menu. That's probably the easiest way to do it, and so on. Also, you have over here on the right side, if the panel is open, again, all these panels in Style Studio can be opened and closed. If you don't see a panel, then that might mean that it's been collapsed, right? So now I don't see that panel. That means that it was collapsed to the side. Unfortunately, it's now hiding under my GoToMeeting. Oh, there it is. So here you can see it's been collapsed over here. You can always pop that open, and it reopens. Seems to have opened up on top of the other panel, but Let's see if I can get them both at the same time. No, really not going to let me do that. Okay, there we go. And let me put GoToMeeting back where it belongs. So that's if you see a panel missing, if you don't even see a panel collapse, then you can always go to the window menu, and if the panel is not visible, you can open it from there. So anyway, you've got this panel. It's called the report element panel. It has a list of properties for whatever component that you click on. So if you click on a chart, you get a very long list of properties. If you click on a text element, you get a short list. And you can also change formatting from here. So the color, the background, those kinds of aspects of formatting you could change from here as well. For example, you click on the foreground, it gives you a little pop-up color picker, and so on. Additionally, you can right-click on a component, for example, a text element, select properties. That gives you a properties dialog box where you've got, in many cases, the very same properties. So again, background, foreground, those kinds of things, those aspects of formatting you can change from here as well. Right, so there's a lot of different places to set formatting. And then for some components, you might have formatting down in the bottom panel. For example, for a table, if you click on a table, right, so then there's a format panel down at the bottom, a format tab down at the bottom, and you can do various formatting from here for a table, right? So foreground color, background color, and we'll look at some of these things later. So just in terms of where you go to do formatting, it varies. It varies by component. For example, just to get back to it in a chart, you don't have the format tab at the bottom, but what you do, you can right-click on a chart, go to properties, and then you've got formatting controls in the properties dialog box, as well as in the right panel. So where you go to do your formatting varies depending on what component you're formatting, and it also depends on just your work style. Do you like to use this panel on the right, or do you prefer to use the properties dialog box for the component? Okay, so with all that said, let's get started and look at some of the types of formatting that you can do. One kind of formatting you might like to do is to change the appearance of a date field, right? So here on the chart, we've got this date field up here. Currently it's using its default representation, which is the year and then a 3-letter month. Let's say we wanted to change that to the month first and then the year, or maybe just the 2-digit year, something like that. So that's a kind of formatting of a date type field. So what I would do for a chart, because I need to do the formatting in the chart properties dialog box, so I would right-click on the chart, go to properties for the chart, and then I would find the field in the chart, on the chart that I want to format. In this case, it's the date field up at the top. Right? So I would click on that date field up at the top, and then I should get my formatting options down at the bottom here. Right? So it says axis label property, and here I can go to do various formatting on that particular field that's represented on the chart, such as font or alignment, all those different kinds of things. If I want to change the way that the date is represented, what I would do is I would select one of these formats over here, in particular the date format. Right, so we've seen these before, I'm almost positive, in other webinars. We've got these 5, actually it looks like 6, well one of them is none, 5 built-in formats that you can apply to data: date, text, number, currency, and percent. And we have this throughout the product reports, dashboards, other places also. And so what you would do if you want to format a date in a particular way, you select the date option, and then you've got this list of different date formats that you can select from. So if you see one that you like, you can select it. If you see one that's close to what you like, you can also select it. Like, for example, this one over here is pretty close. This one is also pretty close, except that it's got the month spelled out. So what I might do is I might choose that one. And you can see that the way that these are represented is actually using these special masks, these different letters that represent particular components of the date. And as I mentioned in the other webinar that we did a year ago or whatever it was, same topic for a dashboard, I'm not going to go into detail on how these represent dates, although common sense will take you a long way here. In this case, if I want a 3-letter month abbreviation, I would do capital M, capital M, capital M, and again, the 2-digit year is just YY. So common sense will get you pretty far here. But again, in case you're interested in seeing the full scope of the syntax, how these different masks, these different symbols all work, and what the spectrum of different symbols is, this is borrowed from the Java standard. So what you would do is you would look up simple date format, Java simple date format, and that would take you to some Java documentation, and then that would show you the full scope of everything that you can, all the dates types of dates that you can represent using these masks. So in this case, this is good enough for me. I would press apply, and I can see the change up top over here in this little preview, right? So that's the way that I want to represent the months, and then press OK, and that change takes effect. So that's a quick illustration of modifying a date. So let's take a look at the kind of modification that you could do to a number format. So on the same chart we have an axis here. This is numerical axis. Obviously it represents the total. So what I might want to do is represent this in a different way, and perhaps instead of having a dollar sign over there, I might want the number and then USD for US dollars. All right. So what I would do is, again, I would return to the chart properties, right-click the chart, select properties, click on that axis. Right? There's the, just click on those numbers there, and now I get some formatting options that are available for that particular axis. So here I would not select a date format because those are not dates, obviously. What I would do is select a number format, and then again I get a choice of a bunch of preset number formats here, and I can try to see if there's one that I like. Perhaps this one over here might not be too bad, right? So this one basically it has 2 decimal places to the right of the decimal point, and then it has placeholders for other digits. Basically, the number signs here, the reason that those are there is to put to supply the location of the comma. So this kind of specifies that we're going to have a comma every 3 digits, and in the event that there is no first digit there, in other words, if the dollar amount is less than $1, then it'll put a 0 there. Right? So basically, these are the fundamental symbols that you have to work with in a number format: the number sign, or the pound sign, or hash sign, whatever you like to call that, and zeros. And they both behave in particular ways. The zeros are basically used to pad out decimal places, and also to provide a number where there is no number. For example, in this position here, we want a 0 to appear if there is no actual number there. And the pound signs are used either to be a placeholder to position comma or other punctuation, and they're also used to do rounding. So if we wanted to round a number to one decimal place, we could use a pound sign over there. That would mean round to 1 decimal place. Again, this is all borrowed from Java. So what you would do if you want to see the full details is you would go to I think it's called a decimal format, Java decimal format, and it would give you the rundown of what these symbols mean and do in all different contexts. So in any case, I've got a number format here, and if I want to put USD, I could just put that on the end, just type USD, and that would just add that to the end, and press apply. And you can see that now I've got the number in the format that I specify, and it's got USD, right? Right, so if I'm happy with that, I can press OK, and then I've got those numbers formatted the way that I want. What I might want to do here, just as far as these numbers go, because they're so large, I might instead prefer to represent these as millions or something like that, and I can also do that using a format. So I'd go back to the properties for the chart, click on that number field. It's interesting that it doesn't. It's not showing me the format that I specified previously. Not sure why that is. It does have the format, it's just not displaying it here. But in any case, what I could do is I could select a different format, like a millions format. So you can see that this one has a capital M. That means basically divide the number by 1,000,000 and put a capital M there, indicating that these are millions. So I could press OK, and you can see that actually wasn't such a good choice, because now I get basically 0 M everywhere. Let's see if I could do better than that. Maybe something, maybe K instead of M. Represented as thousands. Okay, so that's a little bit better. That was just, bad choice for the numbers that I have. So here I have 200K for 200,000 and so on. Okay, so those are just some, very basic kinds of formatting for numbers and for dates. Let's take a look at another of those 5 formats. Remember, there was date, number, text, percent, and currency. Before we go on to the text format, you might wonder what the currency format is. So let's just take a quick look back at that. And if I were to apply a currency format here, there are no further options for a currency format. It's just a binary choice. If you want currency, you select currency. and if you press apply, then basically what you're going to get is a built-in currency format. Right? You can see in this case it has a $ in front of the numbers, and it has 2 decimal places. One thing to keep in mind, and I know I've mentioned this in other webinars, is that the currency format adapts to the locale of the user. So what exactly these numbers look like and how they're presented will depend on the locale that the user is logging in from. So if they're logging in from a foreign locale that uses a different currency symbol and a different currency representation, for example, that uses periods in place of commas, like some countries do, then they would see the numbers in that format. So that's just one thing to keep in the back of your mind. If you're attracted to use the currency format, just keep in mind that it is possible that users other than yourself might see those numbers in a different way depending on their locale. If that's a concern, in other words, if you have users that are logging in from different locales and you don't want that to happen, then what you would do instead is use the number format and put your currency designation like we did here, USD, or a $, or whatever other currency symbol you want in that number representation, dollar, pound, yen, whatever it is, you would put it into the number format, and that's how you avoid the possibility that the numbers may change, or rather the representation of the numbers may change based on locale. So that's the currency format. Let's take a look at the text format, and basically what a text format is. And I know, again, I've mentioned this before, just not in the context of report design, or perhaps I may have even mentioned it before in the context of report design. But text format basically allows you to add a prefix or a suffix to text. And that text could be in a table, could be in a chart, could be in a text element, wherever it is. So in this case, what I might want to do is add a text format to these quantities, right? So if instead of just having these numbers displayed here, if I wanted to say something like 409 units rather than just 409, I could do that using a text format easily. And the way I would do it is I would select any cell in that column, any data cell. The format will apply to all the values in that column. And then down in the properties panel at the bottom, remember for a table, you basically do a lot of your formatting from the properties panel at the bottom, the format tab. So open up the format tab and then select text format. And then you type the prefix or suffix that you want. In this case, it would be units, right? And the important thing to remember is that when you're doing a text format, if you want the actual value that was in that cell, or whatever it happened to be, text element, whatever, if you want the actual value to still be present in addition to the prefix or suffix, then you have to add it by using a special symbol, which is the 0 in curly braces. Right, so 0 in curly braces is a placeholder for the actual value. So 0 in curly braces will give me the value. Then I have my suffix here, which is units, and press apply. Right, and then you can see that in this column I basically have every number concatenated together or followed by the text units. Right, now that is that would not be, if I were designing this report, would not be my choice because it creates a lot of clutter. What I might prefer to do would be to, do something similar but on the column header. So I could actually, there actually is a text format already on that column header because originally it said quantity purchased, and I created a text format that just said quantity. So that field, that cell just got replaced by the word quantity. What I could do is just add units like that. So it says quantity parentheses units, and then I could get rid of that text format on the actual numbers, and that would make things a little bit more, just set that back to none, right? Then that would reduce a lot of the clutter. Obviously it doesn't fit as well, right, now that I have units in that column header. So anyway, obviously you'd have to play with it to decide what look you want for the table, but hopefully you get the idea of using a text format. Okay. So that's a text format. Let's just see if there's anything else that we want to talk about with regard to those 5 basic formats. The other format, the only one I didn't not mention, is a % format, and I don't really have a good place to illustrate that right here. But if you have values that are basically representing percentages or fractions, then you can apply a % format to that. Yeah, I don't have in this report, I don't have anything like that. But so if these values on the chart, if these numbers were actually some percentage values, then you could just, in the same manner that we did before, you could go to properties and select that, select %. If I do this here, it's going to look really strange because if I apply, then I'm going to get these huge numbers, right, 30 million% or something like that, because basically it's multiplying by 100 and then applying a percent sign. That only makes sense if the values actually represent fractional values, right? So if these values on the chart represented, let's say, percent of grand total or something like that, if I set up the chart that way, which of course I could. In fact, let me see if I can just quickly do that. So what if I do for the y-axis, if I do calculate and let's say percent of grand total, right? So now these numbers are representing percentages. So I could go into the properties, right? And I had applied the percent format, right? So if I were to take that off, right, then it would look. Now it's actually going to do a percent format automatically because I selected percent. But anyway, in a case where the values actually do represent percentages or fractions, you can use the percent format and it represents them in a in the expected way. The only thing to note is that if you want additional precision or something like that, the percent format, again, there's no option, so you can't select the percent format and say give me 3 decimal places or something like that. You just can't do it. You just take what you get. If you do want that additional control, then again you have to go back to using a number format, right? And you can do that. Here you could do something like pound 0.00. The 00 to the right of the decimal places gives you a decimal place, gives you 2 decimal points of precision, and then add a percent symbol. Right, so the percent symbol will convert it into a percent representation, but this also gives you the opportunity to indicate the precision that you want, and so that that's how you would get a percent representation with more precision. Okay, so I'm going to take that off and just put the chart back the way it originally was with this set to calculate set to none. Okay, let's go further. The next thing that I'd like to take a look at is the concept of a table style, which is basically a way of formatting a table all at once. Right, so here at the bottom of this report, we have a table. Crosstab happens to be, but still counts as a table. Now you can format parts of a table individually. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. So for example, if you wanted to format an individual cell or a group of cells in a table, what you would do is you would click the click the area that you want to format. So for example, here I'm clicking a cell in the total column, and then you could go down to the panel at the bottom, select the Format tab, and that gives you some formatting options. For example, you could set the background of the table to some green color, something like that. So you can definitely format a table, whether it's a crosstab or a regular table or or a formula table. Any kind of table you can format in kind of a ad hoc piecemeal basis by clicking on different regions of the table and styling the table. So no problem with that. But sometimes you may want to apply a global style to the table. For example, if all of your reports all have tables that share a common style, it's maybe a corporate style is 2 shades of gray and headings in blue or something like that. Right, so if that's the case, then styling a table in a piecemeal manner is going to be very painful if you're doing a lot of reports, because you'd have to, click and style, click, style, click, style, a lot of opportunity for error. What would be better would be to define a table style, which is a global style for the table, and I'll show you in just a moment how you would design one of those. At least I'll give you a sketch of it. But to apply a table style is very simple. You just right-click on the table, you go to Properties for the table, and then in the Properties dialog box for a table, there's a Style region here. Click Select Style, and you find the style that you want, maybe this one. There's also these folders here that, all kinds of fairly, I would say, conservative, to say the least, table styles. But in any case, you select the style that you want and press OK. And press OK again, and the table gets styled. And you can see that the style includes a number of things, including fonts and the weight of the font, bold, can include italics and all other aspects of fonts, foreground, background. So you can style in one shot, style an entire table on a variety of different dimensions. Right, so that's just a quick look at how you would set a table style. Let me see if I can just get a slightly better one that doesn't. Well, I'll just leave it like that. Now, I said that you can also design your own table styles, and I'm not going to go into this now because I feel like I may have touched it in one of our other webinars. But if you want to design your own table style, what you do is you go to the New button, because a table style is an independent component, right? It's not attached to a particular report, but it can be used by many reports. And so what you do is you click New, you go to Component, and select Table Style, right? So you want to create a new table style component that will exist independent of any reports. Press OK. All right, and that gives you this interface. I'm pretty sure we've looked at this before, so if you're interested in the details of this, take a look back. I think we did a webinar on reusable components, so I may have touched on it in that, perhaps. I don't remember exactly. But anyway, what you do here is you either click in this diagram here to select different regions of the table. You can also click in the left panel over here. You can set up custom patterns by defining a mathematical pattern. You right-click over here, select New Pattern, and you could say that you want, let's say, an every other row pattern, right? So I put 2 for start row, and it says repeat every nth row. That means it's pattern that's going to repeat every other row. Press OK. All right, and then I can apply some style to that pattern, for example, background color or something like this, so that background color will apply every other row. And anyway, in this general way, you style the table the way you want, the font, the fonts, the background, the foreground, the borders, and then you can go ahead and save that. Right, so you press, once you've got it, the table styled the way you want, however hideous that might be. Here, let me set a white, right, so we can see the text over there. All right, so you make your table style, you press save, and my crazy style. You give it a name. It gets saved in the style report library, which is a file called stylereport.srl. That's where all the reusable components get saved. So you give it a name, press OK, and it gets saved, and then that's accessible to any report. So now, if we wanted to apply that style to this report, we could go, and I'm not going to because it's horrible, but I could right-click on the report, go to Properties, on the table rather, right-click on the table, go to Properties, select Style, and there's my crazy style, right? And that would be available to tables in any report and also in any dashboard, right? So these table styles that you create are also available to dashboards. Okay, so that's table styles, and again, that's the concept of globally styling a table in one quick shot. Okay, let's move on. Again, feel free to ask me any questions as we go along. Still a number of topics to get to, but if you do have questions, better to ask than to than not to ask. Or I'll just keep going, and then we'll get to more topics. So next topic is the concept of a presenter, and a presenter is basically a graphical format for a numerical field. Right, so for example, consider the quantities here, right? These are represented numerically, as you can see, in this crosstab. What if I wanted to represent these quantities graphically in some manner? In particular, what I'm thinking of is maybe using a bar to represent the quantities. So that's the concept of a presenter, a graphical format. And what you do, again, is you click to select the data that you want to format, and then you go down to the Format panel at the bottom. For a table. That's where you do formatting for a table. And you can see that over on the right here, there's a presenter thing, control, I guess you call it. It doesn't look like you can do anything here, but actually there's a menu, a little pop-up button here, and you can open up a presenter menu. And there's a bunch of different presenters for different purposes. For the most part, they're for representing data. So, if you have data that represents like a product code, you can represent it as a barcode. If you've got data that is binary data, you can represent it as a check mark, either checked or unchecked. If your data is, if it's got 3 different regions that you want to bring to the report reader's attention. In other words, if it doesn't matter the exact value, but let's say you have a low, medium, and high, and that's what you want to make salient to the reader of the report, you could use a traffic light, and that would represent it as red, green, or not red, red, green, or yellow light, and so on. So the documentation discusses most of these. I'll just take for our purposes the horizontal bar presenter. So I selected, I did that probably too quick to see, but I selected the horizontal bar presenter, and you can see that the values are now represented as horizontal bars, but the problem is that I'm hitting some kind of ceiling here where basically the bars are all too big for the cell, so I'm not able to discriminate the differences in the values. So there's also an options button. Some of the presenters have this, so you press the ... button on the right side. All right, and it's got a couple of options here, and you can select the color. Let's say I want that to be a green color. And then you can also set the maximum. So right now the maximum is set to 100. That's much too small. I'll try something larger like 1,000. Right. The idea is that you want the maximum to be bigger than the maximum value that might appear there. Otherwise, the maximum value is going to have a bar that goes off, basically gets cropped off on the right side. So 1,000 might be a good choice. Press close. Press apply over here, the little green checkbox. All right, and so now I get something a little bit more reasonable where those quantity values are represented graphically as a bar. Again, whether you choose to do this or not is entirely a design decision. This has the advantage that it's very quick and easy to scan for, let's say, what's the greatest one. Like right now, it looks to me like this, at least on the first page, this is the biggest one. If I look at the second page, they could see that, very quickly that this guy over here, this is, fancy menus sold by Eric, that's, he's doing the best job over there. So that, it has that advantage of, it really takes advantage of the way that people are able to process information visually. You couldn't do that if it was just numbers. The downside is that I don't really know, what that exact number is now. I know it's the biggest, but but what is it? So what you might want to do is like add, if you're doing that kind of thing, you might want to add another field into the table, one that has the quantity represented graphically, and another one that has it represented numerically, so that you have the best of both worlds in a sense. But anyway, of course that would further complicate the table. Then you've got another column in there. So these are all just design decisions, and I'm just showing you the different techniques that you have at your disposal. So I'm going to put that back. I'll just put that back the way it was. Or should I just want to see if I need to. Actually, I probably don't need to do anything more with that table, so I'll just leave that as is. Okay, so let's take a look. So that's the concept of a presenter. Let's take a look at another kind of graphical formatting, which is the concept of a highlight. A highlight is basically a conditional format. And again, here I'm pretty sure we've done this in other webinars, but in other contexts. But this is it does fall under the rubric of formatting. And so a highlight is where you want to apply formatting if some condition in the data is met, and that could be in a table, in a text element, in a chart. In this case, let's look at the chart, and let's add a highlight condition that will basically trigger and apply formatting to the chart where the total is less than 100,000. Right, so it's very easy to do. What you do is you click on the chart, and then you have to click on the data on the chart. Right, so I had initially just clicked an empty trying to illustrate. So initially I just clicked an empty region of the chart, and you can see that the highlight tab is not enabled. So if you run into that and start scratching your head, just you'll remember back to what I'm saying now, which is that you have to click on an actual data group on the chart, and then you'll see the highlight tab down there, and you can apply a highlight. We've done this in dashboards, and the interface is different, but fundamentally the concept is the same. You press the new button. I'll give it a name less than 1K. I guess it's 100. That would be 1K would be 1,000. So let's do 100K. That's just a name for the highlight. And then you want to specify what formatting will apply. In this case, for a bar chart, you could just apply you can just apply a color to the groups. Right, so the foreground color, and then you set the condition. You press Edit Condition, and the condition is going to be sum of product total is less than 100,000. Right, so there's a condition that will determine when the formatting gets applied. Press OK, and press the Apply button, and you can see that that formatting is now applied to the chart. So I think, let's see if we can also do that for, no, we can't do that for the labels. So that's basically just for the data groups on the chart. Okay, so that's an example, again, of conditional formatting, which we call highlighting. Okay, moving along. There is, in the toolbar, there's, with regard to formatting, I already pointed out that there are a number of basic formatting options that you have in the toolbar, such as alignment and font and stuff like that. There's also this button called Brush. And I think in the dashboard world, when we were looking at dashboard formatting, I think there it's actually called Format Painter. So I'm not sure, and actually in dashboards, brushing means something completely different. Brushing in a dashboard is where you basically highlight data in one chart and it pops out that data in a different chart or in a different table. But brushing here is purely a formatting thing. It's not the same meaning. So let me just show you very quickly what brushing is. And as I pointed out when we did dashboards, it's a concept that you'll find in other software also, like Microsoft Word, I'm pretty sure has that, where you basically copy formats from one element to another, right? So in this case, all the way down on the second page of the report, I've got this formatted text over here. You can see it's got a background color, it's got a white foreground color, I made it a little bit larger, and then on the right side over here, I've got this plain old text element that I applied no formatting to. And so the idea of a brush in the context of a report is that you want to copy formatting from one element to another. Now you can do this not only with text elements, you can also do this with, to some extent, with, for example, tables and charts. But the scope of what exactly, which formats can be copied, is somewhat limited in those cases. So, if you try to copy formatting from one table to another, it might copy some of the formatting, but not all of the formatting, so you'd have to experiment. With text elements, it's pretty straightforward, though. So if I click this text element here, I want to copy the formatting that I have on this text element. I can click that, then press the brush button, and then you see that my cursor, my pointer, turns into a brush, and then I click on this other text element, and nothing happens. So I try it again. I guess I clicked in the wrong place. That time I clicked in the right place, and you can see that it copies the formatting from that first text element to the second text element. Right, so that's the concept of brushing or format painter in a report. And you may find that useful in some cases. In instances, for example, where you have, I would say that probably it's most useful with regard to text elements. So if you have, let's say, a parameter sheet or some other report that has a lot of text elements on it, and you decide, you've made them all one way, and then you decide that that you need to change the font of all of those text elements. So then you're faced with the question, okay, well, do I individually select each text element and go to the panel over here, or the toolbar and change the font, change the size, and so on. So depending on how many changes you need to make to each individual text element, it might be easier to use the format painter and just copy the format from one and drop it onto the other ones. Again, it totally depends on the situation that you're facing. Okay, so enough of that. Now let's move on to something a little bit more advanced. So again, if there's any questions on this basic formatting stuff, feel free to let me know. I want to try to get to a couple of slightly more advanced topics. So I'm going to save what I have so far, close that. And the first of those two advanced topics is cascading style sheets, or CSS. So in the situation that I just described, where you have, for example, you've got a bunch of text elements and you want them all to have the same style, and and somewhere down the road you decide that you need to change styles. For example, you show it to your boss and your boss says, oh, I think all that text is too small, make it bigger. So then you need to go, basically change every text element. You could use, like I just said, the brush option or the format painter to make that a little bit easier. But what would make it really easier is if you, when you had created all those text elements, if you had styled them all with CSS, right? Because then what you would need to do is basically just change a definition in one place in the CSS file, and all those text elements would update because they'd all be pulling the style from that CSS file. So for those of you who are familiar with CSS, hopefully I don't need to say much more about it, but if anyone is unfamiliar, basically CSS is a styling language for web pages, and basically the way it works is you create a text file, one or more text files, and these text files contain the definitions, the styling definitions. So let me just show you an example, a very simple example that I created here. So this is a CSS file. I called it mystyle.css, and basically what it does is it defines two classes. One class is called report heading, and it specifies a foreground color of red, and the other class is called chart background, specifies a background color of some gray color, right? So it's basically, this is a hexadecimal number, and it has red, green, and blue components, but they're all set the same, so that's going to come out some shade of gray. Not sure if it's dark gray or light gray. I guess we'll find out. So that's, a really, really basic CSS file. Obviously, you can do things that are much more elaborate. You don't need to define only classes. A class is basically a set of styles that can be applied to multiple components by assigning a class to those components. So what we'll do in just a second is we'll go back to the report and we'll assign a class to the report title, and we'll assign a class to the chart, and that by using the correct class names, then, so let me get that back. By assigning the correct class names, it'll pull the corresponding style definitions out of this file. But you can also style based on the type of the element. So if you wanted to style all text elements a certain way, you could define a style just based on the component type. You could also define a style based on the component ID. So that would be like in a case where you want to have a unique style for a particular component based on its ID, you could do that. So there's a bunch of different approaches, and I'm not going to get into the details of, what all the limitations of each of those approaches are. It is in the documentation, so if you, if you want to get into the details of it, right? So if you look, I have to correct some aspects of this documentation. I see some of the links are broken here, but basically, look around in the documentation for CSS properties, and you'll find a list of the properties that, in fact, you can style for reports and for dashboards. So not all CSS properties are available to you when you're doing this for reports. So, if you happen to have a web reference on your shelf that tells you how to style web pages using CSS, don't go running right away to that and find the most obscure CSS properties, because those probably will not work in styling a report, right? So there's a set of, a limited set of the basic CSS properties that you can use. So, check over here first. And this also, in the documentation, also describes the different ways that you can apply CSS. Anyway, let me just show you very quickly so that we don't run out of time how we would do this. So the first thing that I would do is, of course, create the CSS file. So there it is, mystyle.css. It exists. Over here, it's already saved. It's just a text file. The next thing that I would do is I would make sure that the report knows where that CSS file is. And to do that, I would go to File, File, Report Properties, and there's a property over here called CSS Location, right? So what I would do is I would enter the CSS location for that file, right? So here it is. By doing this, Style Studio knows where to look for that CSS file. When you deploy a report, you'd probably want to have that CSS file on the class path also, so that it can find it there. So mystyle.css, right? So it can find that file. And then what you want to do is you want to either assign IDs or assign classes to the components that you want to style. So for example, how do I get rid of this brush thing? It keeps trying to get rid of that. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to select the report title here, and what I want to do is I want to assign a class to the report title. In particular, I want to assign that class that I defined in the file here, report heading, right? And the way that I do that is I right-click on that text element, I go to Properties, and you can see that there's a CSS class option over here. You can either type the name of a class, or if you've already associated a CSS file with this report, which we've done, you can click and open the menu here, and it'll show you the classes that are available in that CSS file. In this case, I want to select the report heading class, and what that means is that for this particular text element, it will pull its style from that class in the CSS file. Right, so I'm going to select that, press OK. Now, one thing to remember is that if I add additional style now from within Style Studio, like by using the toolbar or by using the properties here, the text element properties, I could also apply foreground, background, and so on. Those properties will overwrite whatever is being inherited from the CSS file. So basically, the CSS file gets read first, but then anything that I set in the report itself, as far as formatting, will overwrite those properties. But I don't think I've set any properties for this text element, so if I go ahead and save this, save the report, and preview it, I should hope that it will pull that pull that property. Let's see if it does. It does not. Let's see. Why not? Maybe I need to clear. Do I have some other style set here? I should be getting, what property should I be getting? Let's take a look. I should be getting a color red, but I'm not. Why not? This is set. I don't think I set any property here. It's interesting. I'm not sure why I'm not getting that property. Let me check in the portal. Okay. Anyway, that should work. But it's not. It must be the property is being overwritten by the report, but I don't know why. Let me try adding another text element that I know has no formatting on it. I'll call it other report title. Where'd it go? Well, that's strange. There it is. Okay. So I'm going to delete this. Let me just make this. Shouldn't be a problem if I can make it large and bold and centered, but I'm not setting a color. So let's see if it will inherit from the CSS file, and if not, I probably don't have time to explore it further, but the file is there. Okay, so now it got it. I'm not sure why the other one lost it, but you can see that basically I did not set the color from within the report, and so what it's doing is it's setting the color by pulling the properties from the CSS file. So that's why that turns red, again, because the CSS file specifies that for any component that has class report heading, it should be red. And you can assign that class to as many components as you want. It doesn't have to be the singular actual report heading, but any text element, or for that matter, any any other component that that you want to inherit that style, you can set to class report title, and it will pull that style from the CSS file. Okay, let me cover one last thing, and then I'll take any questions. And the very last thing is localization, which is not really a formatting topic, but localization is a way of changing the display of report elements, which I guess is essentially what formatting does. So so I'm including it here. I don't know if we did a webinar on localization in particular, but anyway, if we did not, then get a taste of it here. Localization basically means that you want to change basically change the text of report or dashboard elements depending on the locale that the user is logging in from, right? So if you've got a user logging in from the US, then you want to display the report in in English, say. And if you've got a user logging in from France, or let's say Canada, French Canada, or Germany, or somewhere else, then you want to display a report in, whatever language those users will understand. Probably in most cases that would be English also, but but if you're if you have a substantial user base that has a different language as their first language, then you may want to accommodate them by by creating a translated version of the report. So that's the concept of localization. So again, it's not really a formatting topic, but it's it's related to formatting. So I'm just going to show you very quickly how you would do that. So how do you create a localization for a report? Well, there's a few steps to it. The first step is that you have to create a mapping file, right? So so basically, you have to, in your report, you have to decide which components you want to localize. Right? So in this case, I'm going to keep it as simple as possible, and I'm going to say that I just want to localize the report title. In other words, if a user logs in from, let's say, the US, then I want to display the report title, and I want it to say simply report title. Right, so this is the way I'm saving the report, right? So that's the actual way the report is. But if a user logs in from, let's say, French Canada, then I want this this report title to be displayed in French, right? So that's the basic plan here. So the first thing I need to do is I need to assign a text ID to this component, right? And the way that I do that is I go to usually it's best to give it a regular ID first. So if I right-click on this guy, go to Edit, not Edit, sorry. Right-click, go to Properties, right? Every component has an ID, and right now the ID of this component is text4. That's going to hurt me if I leave it, if I leave it as the default like that. It's going to be very difficult for me to, put together a report localization if everything is called text1, text2, text3. So that's the first thing that I want to change, and I'll just call it, main title. It's just an arbitrary identifier for that particular component. Okay, so far so good. Change the ID. Now it's called main title. Then what I do is I go to the report menu over here, select localization. And here it's going to give me a list of all the different components that are in the report. And if I want to access that particular component, I'll look in the header, because that's where it is, default header. And you can see that there's the component listed by its ID, which is the ID that I just gave it. Right? And you can see here why it would be a problem if I, if I use all the default IDs for these components. When I'm trying to assign the localization text ID strings, it's going to be really difficult for me to figure out what's what. So that's why I want to give meaningful names. So this one I did give a meaningful name, main title, and for the text ID I'll just call report title. Again, this is just an identifier, right? It's just a designation for that particular element that will be used in the localization mapping file, right? So this text element, which has ID main title, now has a text ID report title. And hopefully that makes sense. And I'm going to copy that because I'm going to need to use it in the mapping file. Right? So then press OK and save the report. Right? So that's all I need to do within the report is assign these text IDs to any components that I want to localize. Then I have to create a localization file. Right? So I'm going to go back to my text editor, and I already created one here. And I'll tell you a little bit about the name in a second. But basically in this file, I have to have a list of mappings. Right? So here I just have one. So you can see report title. Right? That's the name of the text ID that I just assigned to that text element. And so basically what you should have in this file is you should have a list of the text IDs that you want to map. Right? And then an equal sign, right? Following each text ID an equal sign, and then the alternative language text that you want to replace the actual report text. So in this case, when this report is localized, I want this text element, instead of saying report title, I want it to say French report title. Right? So if somebody logs in from French Canada, they're going to see that text instead of the actual report text, because I've got this text ID, which is mapping to the text ID that I set in that text element. Okay. So that's what this file looks like. It looks like a long list of text IDs on the left, an equal sign, and then the replacement text on the right. Right. Now the name of the file has to be exactly right. And the name of this file is called SREE bundle. Right, this is all in the documentation, and so I'm not going to belabor it too much. SREE bundle, then underscore, then the language code, and then an underscore, and then the country code. So FR_CA means French Canada. We did not make up these codes. These are basically following Java. So if you're wondering what the available codes are, search for Java localization or Java language and country codes. And those in turn follow some, ISO standard. So anyway, it's all pretty well documented what the, language and country codes are. You choose what you want. You build the file name using the language and country codes like that. Okay, and then you save it. Right. So then that's saved. You need to save it in a particular place. It needs to go on the class path for the server, because the server will need to find it. I'm not going to go into details on that. Again, it's in the documentation, but that's where I have saved it. If you look up here in the in my the top, you can see that it's saved into web apps SREE webinf/classes. That's on the class path for the server. Okay, and then there's one more thing to do to get this to work, and that is that you need to create the locale. You need to register the locale in the Enterprise Manager, which is the administration tool. So I'm going to do this very quickly. I'll just go over to Enterprise Manager. I may have already done it before, so I'll just take a quick look. Just make sure. So in Enterprise Manager, again, only an administrator would typically be doing this. I'm going to go to Configuration, Localization, and I can see that I've already got that locale registered. I did that earlier this morning when I was testing this out. And if you did want to, if you wanted to add it from scratch, I'll just show you how to do it. So I'll delete that. And what you do to add a locale, it's actually very simple. You press Add, you enter the language code, FR, you enter the country code, CA in this case, and you enter a label, and I'll just call it Canada. Or maybe I'll call it Ontario or something like that. Or Toronto, I don't know, whatever. Montreal. How about that? Right, so that's just an arbitrary label. That's the label that the user will be able to pick from the login screen. Right, so there you go, and then you press apply, and that registers the locale. So basically what this means, what you've done on this screen as the administrator is you're just basically creating a choice that the user can make when they log in, right? So and of course, as an administrator, you can also assign a default locale to different users, so then a user wouldn't have to make that explicit choice. But basically, a user now, when they log in, will be able to choose a Montreal locale. And when they do that, because Montreal, the label is mapped to FRCA, what the server will do is it will look for that particular file, right, that we created here. It'll look for a file called SREE bundle _ FR _ CA .properties. It'll load up that file as the localization file, and then whenever it finds a component in a report that has a text ID report title, it'll substitute this replacement text. That's how the whole thing works. I'll just test it out really quick. I know we're out of time. So let me just, so I've got that. We did create that, so now I'm going to, let's just see if I go into the portal. I don't know if I need to restart the server or not, but I'll just give it a try. Log out. All right, so you can see when I'm logging in, it gives me a choice of Montreal here as a locale. So I'll select Montreal, log in, right? And what that should do, if everything is working right, it should load up that localization file. And then when I go to this report that we created, which is called Formatting Webinar, and load up that report, then it should find that that report title. There it is. Right? And because that report title has a text ID called report title, it'll look into the mapping report and substitute the localization. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. Obviously, localization has some other aspects to it, but again, short webinar, and it's 12 o'clock. So I'm going to stop here and just ask if anybody has any questions about anything that we covered today, vis-a-vis formatting or anything else that you saw me do. I'll just, as usual, wait a minute or so in case anybody's typing. Okay, something popped up. No questions. Okay, all right. All right, guys, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being here. And have a great weekend, and hope to see you next month. Thanks a lot. Take care.